All right, everybody, this is Marc Sims again with my podcast, Just a Few Questions. Let me talk into the mic like this. Adolfo, let me pronounce your name.
All
Adolfo
right.
Mondragon. Close
That's
enough?
right.
Close enough? How do you pronounce
Yeah,
it,
you
man?
got it.
Come on, give me a pronunciation.
Mondragon. So Mon, it's Mon, and then Dragon. Mondragon.
So, but you said you don't roll the R's if there's only one R.
That's correct. In Spanish, there's a character that's actually a double R. It's a character in and of its own. And that one is, that's you roll it. But a single R, you don't.
Now you're starting to sound like Carly B or something, man. I didn't take Spanish, so you lost. But see, I met you on our friend Benny J's show, his podcast,
That's right.
and I've heard you before I met you. But you have a great story. You went to Curie High in Chicago, then to Yale, and then the University of Chicago Law. If Yale wasn't enough, you know what I'm saying? And nothing wrong with Curie.
Right.
So how did somebody
Right.
from the Southwest Side get to Curie, Yale University, and University of Chicago Law and become a lawyer?
Well, part of it is a lot of hard work, and part of it is luck. You know that old joke? How do you get to um,
Carnegie Hall.
oh my God,
Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall?
Yeah.
Right, practice, practice, practice. Right. So it's kind of similar. I mean, you don't get to Yale or University of Chicago just on pure luck alone. There's some luck that is required, particularly if you're an ethnic minority. But most of it you gotta just work your ass off, work your butt off. So, but yeah, you do have to get a lucky break here or there because without that, statistically, it's almost impossible to get in. And if you're coming from a marginalized community, then statistically, it's even harder to get in. So, I mean, I still, kind of wonder how the hell I got there, but sure to be sure, with all the hard work, you still need a little bit. You need a break.
But you were a hardworking student at Curie High here in Chicago, right?
Right, that's right. Graduated. Technically, I graduated three in my class because I had the top spot at the end, and then there's some controversial stuff that happened, and two people usurped me by a little bit in very important average. So there was a tie for first, and I was second. But when there's a tie for first, you know that you're actually third.
So it sounds like you're still upset over this.
Yeah, kind of. Because freshman year when I came in, I thought it was hot shit, and my first my first report card, I saw how they rank you they rank you twice a year, right? The second report card and the fourth one. And I remember my freshman year, at Curie, your class starts out really big, and then it dwindles down over the years. So my freshman year, we were something like 1,200 students, and I was right in the middle, like or above the middle, like 500. And I was like, man, I'm 500. How the hell did this happen? So from there, I was just like, okay, I gotta do something to start climbing up these ranks. And sure enough, it took a while, but by my last year, I was actually by my third year, I was in the top 10. And then, once you're in the top 10, it's really hard to move up one or two or whatever, because at that point, everyone is doing really well. But yeah, didn't quite get that one.
I see you still working it out. Now,
Yeah,
how did you get to Yale, man? Yale. That's like what's that? New Haven, Connecticut.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because when you're growing up on the Southwest Side, or on the South Side of Chicago in general, you don't even hear of places like Yale or Harvard, except in popular culture, like if you see a show or something and somebody mentions Harvard or Yale or any other big school like that. And so, but growing up, I had heard of these places in popular culture as some mythical places to go to, right? Matlock. Oh yeah, Matlock was a Harvard graduate, and you saw L.A. Law. Some of those characters were supposed to be from top law schools. And I remember the show, a rerun actually, of a show that's not even from my generation, not even from your generation, maybe from Benny's. Not just kidding. Remember there was a rerun of a black and white show called Dobie Gillis.
Oh, Dobie Gillis is before me, man. That's what. What's the guy? Gilligan's Island. The guy was Gilligan's Island. What's Bob
Yeah,
Denver?
exactly,
Bob Denver was
exactly. So
like a
you know,
beatnik
but
hippie on that show.
exactly. But you know the show, right? You've seen
Right.
it in reruns,
Right.
right?
Right.
So growing up, I had seen a couple episodes of Dobie Gillis, and if you remember, the sister of Dobie Gillis, the little sister, always wanted to go to Yale, and I was like, wow, Yale, it's got to be this. And she was like, the character on there, she was like this super smart, geeky little sister of Dobie Gillis, and she wanted to go to Yale. So I was like, wow, this mythical place called Yale, and had heard of Harvard because Harvard is thrown around in popular culture, movies, shows, stuff like that. So by the time I got to high school, I was like, why can't I go to these places, right? But it's much harder than you think or than TV makes you think. When I was preparing to take the ACT and then ultimately the SAT, because you need the SAT for the East Coast schools, or at least you did back then. I remember going to my uh, college counselor at Curie. There was a college counselor, a career center guy. He was the one person who everybody had to go to in terms of planning out your college plans or whatever. And I remember this guy named Phil Sims, and I remember asking him, Mr. Sims, I need a SAT application form, and because it was custom that everybody in the Midwest just takes the ACT, he led me to some broom closet, and then he shuffled around in there, and he dug out the one sample SAT form that they sent all college counselors. And he said, "Here you go. Good luck." So there
That
was
oh that
no
that was
prep
it.
or any,
That was it.
that was it. And if in the SAT and the ACT and the SAT are different strategies because ACT doesn't penalize you for wrong answers, so you're encouraged to guess at the end if you run out of time. But the SAT, you get penalized a quarter point for every wrong answer. Not only that, their math components are a little bit different. Um, so in terms of getting in, even just prepping to try to get into it, um, you had to do things on your own because although there was a lot of wonderful teachers, no one really was thinking that any of these kids are aiming to go to the Ivy League or junior Ivy League or any prestigious place outside of maybe a top, a Big Ten school or something like that.
So you saying if it wasn't for Dobie Gillis, you would never had the thought to even go to Yale.
I think that's
You know what I'm
probably
saying?
fair
You
to
know what I'm
say.
saying, right? You know what
No,
I'm
no,
saying.
no. But you know what, Mark? I think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah.
I think that in this, outside of those, wishful thinking from things that I saw in popular culture, there was nothing within my own world, including the school, that told me that I should reach for or go for a place like a Yale or Harvard, or that they even existed. For me, when I was in high school, they said, uh, there's the city schools, DePaul, Loyola, there's the U of I, UIC, and all very good schools, right? And then they said if you want to reach, that we have Northwestern, we have the University of Chicago, both, of course, top tier schools. But no one ever said, hey, there's a thing called Stanford out on the West Coast, or UC Berkeley, or Vanderbilt, or even small colleges like Amherst, or Emory in Atlanta, or none of this
And this
stuff.
this was in the '90s, right?
Right. I graduated from Curie in '92, so this is in the '90s, the
Mm.
early '90s,
Wow.
and no one, none of that is in the vocabulary of the school system teaching you
But you
where
got
to
but some
go.
kind of way you got there. You fill out the application, you passed the test, and you got to Yale.
Yeah, so I applied to about 8 schools, and most of them were local, and some of them I knew I already was in, like at the University of Illinois, because I was an in-state student and I had done really well on my ACT, so they automatically know who does well on that, and they offer you a scholarship even before you apply, right? They call it the presidential scholarship. It's like a full ride. So I knew I was there, and I had just applied to a couple of local schools. My older sister was going to DePaul, so I applied to DePaul. And then I reached for Northwestern, U of C. And then I had 3 outside schools that because you had to pay for these applications. It's not like today where you have
Right.
first of all, there was no common application that all schools took like there is today. and there was no, there were fee waivers, but you had to get an independent fee waiver for every school that you applied to if
Wow.
you wanted to, right?
Hmm.
So if I applied to 8, I would have to get 8 fee waivers. So so I chose 8, which was a lot back then, and probably not anymore because everyone does the common law, the common application. They can apply to a million schools at once. But every one of those cost me money that I didn't, have a lot of, and so I chose 3 schools out of the area: Georgetown in D.C., um, Harvard, and Yale, and those are like my dream schools. But because again, things like Show Dobie Gillis or whatever mention these things in society, and I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can get into those places, and and I so here's what happened. I got into every school except Harvard. Harvard outright rejected me. I got into Yale, and yeah, I didn't get waitlisted anyway. I got into all of them, and so yeah, so basically I said, all right, well then I want to go to you know the best place or the best ranked place, even though I had no idea what Yale was about, and I got really lucky in that sense because, as you and I know now, that a lot of universities you can get a great education at most or universities, particularly if you study something like math, which is universal across the board or whatever. But if there's those little nuances that will either make you love a place or hate a place, right?
Right.
And so I didn't know about any of those nuances for Yale. Fortunately for me, when I got there, I was the right fit. But now that I think back, had I gotten into Harvard, I would have probably gone to Harvard over Yale simply based on the fact that popular culture values Harvard so much more than Yale, or at least it did then. I think it's kind of taken a little bit of a turn. Um, and I would have hated it at Harvard, and I probably would have dropped out. So again, luck has things to do with it. It was actually a lucky break for me to have been rejected at Harvard because knowing what I know now, I would have not fit on that campus. And
Adolfo, can I ask you a quick question? I got to stop this little
sure,
podcast. I have a time restraint. I got to stop this one, and can I do a part 2 and finish this up and talk about becoming a lawyer?
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
let's take a break, and hopefully everybody will see this part 2.